The Valorian Empire had existed for over 3,000 years, and in that time they had brought 73 different worlds under their control. Their method was simple, and it had never failed them before. They would arrive in orbit around a new planet with their massive warships, and they would send a message to the people below. The message always said the same thing. Submit now and join the Empire peacefully, or resist and face the consequences. Every single time the people below would look at the massive ships in their sky, and they would realize they had no choice. Within days or sometimes hours, the leaders of those worlds would sign the papers and become part of the Empire. It was efficient, and it was clean, and Commander Zalthor had overseen 42 of these operations himself without a single problem. When the Empire detected radio signals coming from a small blue and green planet in a quiet part of the galaxy, Zalthor was assigned to bring them into the fold. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, and the dominant species called themselves humans. The initial scans showed that humans were not particularly advanced compared to most spacefaring races. They had only recently developed nuclear technology, and their space program was limited to their own moon and a few probes sent to nearby planets. They had no unified planetary government, which made them even easier to deal with in Zalthor's experience. Divided people could never mount an effective resistance. The Eternal Dominion dropped out of faster-than-light travel just beyond Earth's moon and began its approach. The ship was over 2 miles long and bristled with weapons that could crack a planet's crust if needed. Zalthor stood on the bridge and watched as Earth grew larger on the view screen. It was a pretty world, he thought, with all that blue water and those white clouds. It would make a fine addition to the Empire. He ordered his communications officer to send the standard message in all of Earth's major languages. The translation computers had easily decoded human speech from their broadcasts, and the message went out clear and strong. The Valorian Empire has arrived. You will submit to Imperial authority. Prepare to receive our delegation for the signing of terms. The response came back much faster than expected. A human voice speaking what the computers identified as English replied with an almost cheerful tone. Welcome to Earth. We received your message and we would be happy to meet with you. Please land at the coordinates we are sending now. We have prepared a location in New York City for our first meeting. We look forward to speaking with you. Zalthor's bioluminescent patterns flickered in mild surprise. The human sounded friendly. Almost too friendly. In his experience, species usually responded in one of two ways. Either they sent back angry messages full of empty threats, or they sent back scared messages asking for mercy. This response was neither. It was like the humans thought the Valorians were guests instead of conquerors. Perhaps they were simply too primitive to understand the situation. That would make things even easier. The Eternal Dominion descended through Earth's atmosphere, and the humans cleared the airspace around something called Manhattan Island. Crowds of humans gathered in the streets below to watch the ship land. Zalthor could see them on the monitors. They were pointing up at his ship, and many of them were holding up small devices to record the landing. Some were even waving. It was bizarre behavior. These people should be terrified, but instead they looked excited. The ship settled onto a large flat area that the humans had marked out with lights. As soon as the landing struts touched down, Zalthor gathered his team. There were 6 of them in total, all trained diplomats who specialized in negotiating surrender terms. They wore their formal robes, which were deep purple and covered in symbols of the Empire's power. Zalthor himself wore his commander's armor, which was designed to make him look even larger and more impressive than his natural 8-foot height. Every piece of their appearance had been calculated to intimidate. The boarding ramp extended, and Zalthor led his team down onto human soil. The air was breathable, but it smelled strange. A mix of things he could not identify. Vehicle exhaust and food, and millions of humans all living close together. 3 humans waited for them at the bottom of the ramp. 2 men and 1 woman. All 3 wore simple clothing that looked almost casual. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward with his hand extended in what Zalthor's cultural database identified as a greeting gesture. The man smiled, and his voice was warm when he spoke. Commander Zalthor, I presume. I am Captain Jake Morrison with the Earth Defense Initiative. This is Dr. Lisa Campbell, our chief expert in communication and language, and this is General Paul Henderson, our military advisor. Welcome to Earth. Zalthor stared at the extended hand for a moment. The gesture was meant to be friendly, but it felt wrong somehow. He was here to accept their surrender, not to exchange pleasantries like equals. He ignored the hand and drew himself up to his full height. His four eyes fixed on the three humans and his pattern shifted to a deep red that indicated dominance and power. I am Commander Zalthor of the Valorian Imperial Fleet. You have received our terms. We are here to formalize your world's integration into the Empire. The process will be swift if you cooperate. Jake Morrison lowered his hand, but his smile did not fade. He glanced at Lisa Campbell and something passed between them. Some kind of silent communication that Zalthor could not interpret. Then Jake looked back up at him and said something completely unexpected. Right, so about that, we definitely got your message and we read through all the terms. Very thorough work, by the way. Must have taken your legal team a long time to put all that together. But we were thinking maybe before we get into all the heavy stuff, we could sit down and talk over some food. Have you guys eaten? We were not sure what your biology is like, so we ordered a bunch of different options. Do you like pizza? Zalthor's patterns flickered rapidly through several colors. Confusion, irritation, more confusion. His translator had clearly understood the words correctly, but the meaning made no sense. He had just told these humans they were being conquered, and this man was asking him about food. Behind him, his advisors were equally confused. One of them leaned close and whispered, "Commander, what is pizza? Is this some kind of primitive weapon?" Zalthor did not know how to answer that question. He looked at the three humans who were all watching him with expressions that seemed friendly and patient. The woman Lisa Campbell spoke up. Pizza is food. Bread with tomato sauce and cheese and various toppings. We got pepperoni, which is a meat, and we also got vegetarian options in case your species does not eat meat. We also have something called wings and breadsticks, and drinks, of course. We figured you probably had a long trip and might be hungry. This was not how conquests were supposed to go. Zalthor had conducted dozens of these operations, and never once had the conquered species offered him food. He opened his mouth to speak, but General Henderson interrupted him with a friendly gesture toward a nearby building. We set everything up inside, climate-controlled and private. We can talk about everything there. Unless you would rather do this outside. It is a nice day, but it might get loud with all the news helicopters. Zalthor looked up, and sure enough, there were several small human aircraft circling overhead. All of them had cameras pointed at his ship. Beyond them, he could see the crowds of humans pressed against barriers that had been set up around the landing zone. Many of them were still waving. Some held up signs with words written on them. "Welcome, aliens. Take me to your leader. Humans equal friends." It was the strangest reception Zalthor had ever experienced. Zalthor found himself sitting in a room that the humans called a conference hall, and in front of him were several flat boxes that contained what they called pizza. The smell was strange but not unpleasant. A mix of baked bread and melted cheese and spices he could not identify. Around the table sat his 6 advisors and the 3 humans who had met them at the landing site. The humans had opened the boxes and were already eating while talking casually among themselves. Zalthor's cultural training had not prepared him for this situation. Jake Morrison picked up a triangular slice of the pizza and bit into it. He chewed for a moment and then gestured at the boxes with his free hand. "Seriously, you should try some. This is from the best pizza place in the city. We got pepperoni and cheese and mushroom, and one with just vegetables. The vegetable one has peppers and onions and olives." He paused and looked at Lisa Campbell. "Do you think they can eat olives? What if their biology is different?" Lisa shrugged and pulled out a small device. "We scanned their ship when it entered orbit. Basic carbon-based life forms, similar digestive systems to ours based on the heat signatures. They should be able to process most of what we eat." She looked at Zalthor with genuine curiosity, though we probably should have asked first. "Can you eat this food or should we get something else?" Zalthor's pattern shifted through several colors rapidly. This entire interaction was wrong. He was supposed to be presenting surrender terms, and instead he was being offered food by people who seemed genuinely concerned about his dietary needs. One of his advisors, named Krelmach, leaned forward and sniffed cautiously at the pizza. The younger Valorian looked at Zalthor with uncertainty. "Commander, what should we do?" What could they do? Walking out would seem weak. Refusing the food might be seen as an insult and could complicate things later. And truthfully, Zalthor was curious despite himself. He reached out with his clawed hand and picked up one of the triangular slices. It was warm and the cheese stretched as he lifted it. He brought it to his mouth and took a small bite. The taste was unexpected. Rich and savory with multiple flavors mixing together, it was actually quite good. He took another bite before he could stop himself. Jake grinned and nudged General Henderson. See? Everybody loves pizza. It is a universal constant. He grabbed another slice for himself and leaned back in his chair. So, Commander Zalthor, tell us about the Valorian Empire. How long have you guys been out here exploring the galaxy? Zalthor swallowed his bite of pizza and tried to regain control of the conversation. We are not here to discuss the Empire's history. We are here to discuss your integration into Imperial authority. You will submit to our rule, and in return you will receive the protection and resources of the Empire. Right. Jake nodded as if this was perfectly reasonable. We got all that from your initial message. Very clear. But here is the thing. We have some questions about how this whole Empire thing actually works. Like, what kind of government structure do you have? Is it a monarchy or more like a parliament or something else entirely? Lisa pulled out a tablet and started making notes. And what about currency? Do you use a standard credit system, or is it based on resource exchange? We have economists who are very interested in understanding the imperial economy. Also, what are your trade policies? Are member worlds allowed to trade with each other independently, or does everything go through a central authority? General Henderson added his own question. What about military service? Do you conscript soldiers from member worlds, or do you maintain your own standing army? And how do you handle disputes between different member worlds? Is there a court system or arbitration process? Zalthor's head was spinning. No species had ever asked these questions before. They were supposed to be scared or angry or resigned. Not curious, not asking detailed questions about governmental structure and economic policy. He looked at his advisors, but they seemed equally lost. This was not covered in their training. Finally, he managed to respond. These are not matters for you to question. You will learn the structure of the Empire once you are part of it, but that does not make sense, Jake said with a confused expression. How can we agree to join something if we do not understand how it works? That would be like signing a contract without reading it. Nobody does that, he paused. Well, some people do that, but they usually regret it later. Lisa nodded in agreement. We would need to present any agreement to the United Nations for approval. And they will definitely want answers to all these questions, and probably a lot more. There are 193 member nations in the UN, and each one will have their own concerns and questions. It could take months just to get through the preliminary discussions. Months. Zalthor's patterns flashed bright orange, which indicated shock. Integration should take days at most. Usually hours. The Empire sends the terms and the planet's leaders sign them and it is done. Simple and efficient. But these humans were talking about months of discussions and questions and something called a United Nations that apparently needed to approve everything. He felt his control of the situation slipping away entirely. Krelmak had been quietly eating pizza and listening. He swallowed a bite and spoke up hesitantly. Commander, perhaps we could answer some of their questions. It might help move things along. He looked at the humans. The Empire uses a hierarchical governance model with the High Council at the top. Each member world sends a representative to the regional councils which report to the High Council. All major decisions are made by the High Council, but individual worlds maintain some local autonomy. See, that is helpful, Lisa said while typing notes into her tablet. What percentage of autonomy are we talking about? Like, can we keep our own laws or do we have to adopt imperial law entirely? Local cultural practices are generally permitted as long as they do not conflict with imperial law. Krelmak continued, and he seemed to be warming to the topic. Trade between worlds is regulated but allowed. The Empire takes a portion of each world's production as tribute, but the amount varies based on the world's resources and development level. Jake leaned forward with interest. What kind of portion are we talking about? Like 10% or 50%? Because that makes a big difference. Earth produces a lot of stuff, but we also have a lot of people to feed and house and keep happy. Generally between 15 and 30% depending on various factors. Krelmak said, worlds that contribute military forces to the Imperial fleet receive reduced tribute rates. Advanced manufacturing worlds pay different rates than agricultural worlds. Zalthor wanted to stop his advisor from giving away so much information, but he found himself curious to see where this was going. The humans were taking notes and asking follow-up questions, and somehow the whole thing had turned into an actual negotiation, instead of a simple acceptance of terms. It was unprecedented, but it was also strangely engaging. Paul Henderson finished his slice of pizza and wiped his hands on a napkin. Here is one of my main concerns. You said we would receive protection from the Empire. Protection from what exactly? Are there hostile forces out there we should know about? Pirates or rival empires or something else? There are various threats in the galaxy, Krelmak admitted. Some regions have raider groups that attack undefended worlds. There are also unexplored areas with unknown dangers. The Empire maintains a fleet specifically to protect member worlds from these threats. Lisa looked up from her tablet. And what happens if a member world wants to leave the Empire? Is there an exit process or are we locked in forever? The room went silent. Zalthor's patterns went completely dark, which was a sign of extreme discomfort among Valorians. No one had ever asked that question before. In 3,000 years of Imperial history, no world had ever tried to leave once they had joined. The concept was so foreign that there was not even a policy for it. He realized he had no idea how to answer. His advisors looked equally uncomfortable. Jake noticed the reaction and his expression softened. Okay, that is clearly a sensitive topic. We can come back to that one later. How about we talk about something more positive? What are the benefits of joining the Empire? Besides protection, I mean. What do member worlds get out of this arrangement? Zalthor seized on the question gratefully. Member worlds gain access to Imperial technology and medical advances. We share agricultural techniques and manufacturing processes. Worlds that were struggling often flourish after integration because they receive support from more advanced members of the Empire. That actually sounds pretty good, Jake admitted. We could definitely use some advanced technology, especially medical technology. We have diseases that we cannot cure yet, and if you have solutions that would save millions of lives. He paused. Though we would need to maintain our research independence. Human scientists would want to study and understand any technology we receive, not just use it blindly. Of course, Lisa added. And we would expect technology transfer to be reciprocal. Earth might not be as advanced as the Empire, but we have developed some unique solutions to problems. Our computer technology, for instance, is quite sophisticated, and our cultural output is significant. Music and art and literature and film. That has value too. The negotiations continued into the second day, and Zalthor found himself experiencing something he had never felt during a conquest operation before. He was actually uncertain about how to proceed. The humans had spent hours asking questions and taking notes and requesting clarification on various points of Imperial policy. They had also insisted on showing the Valorian delegation around their city, which Zalthor had agreed to, mainly because he did not know how to refuse without seeming hostile. Now he stood in a massive building that humans called the Natural History Museum, and Lisa Campbell was walking him through an exhibit about creatures called dinosaurs. These animals ruled Earth for about 165 million years. Lisa explained as she gestured at a massive skeleton that towered above them. This one is a Tyrannosaurus rex. It was one of the largest predators that ever lived on our planet. Then about 65 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth and changed the climate dramatically. Most of the dinosaurs died out. Only the birds survived as their descendants. Zalthor stared up at the enormous skull with its rows of teeth. Each tooth was longer than his hand. This creature had been a formidable predator, and yet it had been wiped out by a random celestial event. He looked at Lisa. You show me this to demonstrate that your world is dangerous. Not exactly, Lisa said with a small smile. I am showing you this to give you context about humans. See, we are a very young species compared to the dinosaurs. Modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years, and we have only had what we call civilization for about 10,000 years. We are newcomers to this planet, and we are definitely newcomers to the galaxy, but we have survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions and plagues and wars. We are adaptable. That is our strength. Jake Morrison joined them and looked up at the dinosaur skeleton. We also wanted you to understand that Earth has been through a lot. Life here is tough and competitive. Everything evolves to survive in harsh conditions. Humans are no different. We might not be as advanced as the Valorian Empire, but we know how to survive difficult situations. Zalthor's patterns shifted to a thoughtful blue color. Is this meant to be a threat? Are you suggesting you would resist Imperial authority? No, not a threat, Jake said quickly. Just information. We want you to understand who we are before any decisions are made. Understanding prevents conflicts. At least that is our hope. He gestured toward another exhibit. Come on. Let me show you the space exploration section. I think you will find it interesting. They walked through halls filled with displays about human history and achievements. Zalthor saw primitive tools made of stone and then metal tools and then machines and computers. He saw spacecraft that humans had built to explore their own solar system. Simple vessels compared to Valorian ships, but impressive for a species that had only recently developed space travel. What struck him most was the progression. Humans had gone from stone tools to orbital spacecraft in just a few thousand years. That was remarkably fast development. That evening, Jake and Lisa took the Valorian delegation to something they called a comedy club. It was a small dark room with tables and a stage. Humans sat at the tables drinking various beverages and talking among themselves. Zalthor and his team were given a table near the front, and the humans around them stared with obvious curiosity, but also friendliness. Several people waved or smiled at them. One human child at a nearby table asked his mother if he could say hello to the aliens, and the mother allowed it. The small human approached and looked up at Zalthor with wide eyes. "You are really tall," the child said. "Are all aliens tall like you?" "Most Valorians are my height," Zalthor replied awkwardly. He had never spoken to a human child before. He had never spoken to any alien child before. Conquered species usually kept their young hidden away during the integration process. "Cool," the child said. "Do you want to see my toy spaceship?" He held up a small plastic model of what Zalthor recognized as a human space shuttle. "I want to be an astronaut when I grow up and go to space and meet aliens like you." "That is a worthy goal," Zalthor said because he could not think of anything else to say. The child smiled and ran back to his mother, who mouthed the words "thank you," before turning her attention back to the stage. The lights dimmed, and a human man walked onto the stage holding a microphone. He was Asian in appearance and wore casual clothing. "Good evening, everyone," the man said, and his voice carried through the room. "My name is Danny Kim, and I am a comedian, which means I get paid to make you laugh, hopefully. If I do a bad job, you can throw things, but please aim for the stage and not my heresy." The audience laughed, and Zalthor felt confused already. Why would they throw things at the performer? Was this some kind of combat ritual? He leaned toward Jake, who whispered back, "It is a joke. He is not serious. Just watch and listen." Danny Kim continued his performance. "So I heard we have some special guests in the audience tonight. We got actual aliens visiting from space. That is wild. They came all the way across the galaxy to tell us we are part of their empire now. That takes confidence. I cannot even get my landlord to fix the heat in my apartment. But these guys conquered 73 star systems. Clearly they have better communication skills than my landlord." The humans in the audience laughed loudly. Zalthor's patterns flickered. The comedian was making jokes about the empire. About him. This should have been offensive, but somehow it was not meant to be insulting. It was just humor. Danny Kim went on. "But seriously, imagine the paperwork involved in running an empire that big. You probably need to file forms in triplicate just to conquer a planet. Welcome to the Valorian Empire. Please take a number and wait 6 to 8 business millennia for processing." More laughter. Zalthor noticed that his advisor Krelmak was making a strange sound. A sort of chirping hiccup that he quickly tried to suppress. Lisa heard it too and turned to look at the young Valorian with delight on her face. "Did you just laugh? That is amazing. What does Valorian laughter sound like?" Krelmak looked mortified. His patterns went dark with embarrassment. "I apologize, Commander. It was inappropriate. The human's words created an unexpected reaction in my thinking patterns. It will not happen again. But laughter is good," Lisa said gently. "It means you found something funny. That is a positive thing. Humans laugh all the time. It is how we deal with stress and fear and difficult situations. We make jokes about everything, including ourselves, especially ourselves." On stage, Danny Kim was still performing. "And can we talk about how they showed up in this huge spaceship? Like they could not have called ahead. Just dropped into orbit like surprise, we are here to conquer you. Hope this is a good time. My mom does the same thing when she visits. Never calls, just shows up at my door with food and opinions about my life choices." Zalthor found himself making a sound that was similar to Krelmak's chirping hiccup. He stopped immediately and looked around, but the humans did not seem alarmed. Jake was grinning at him. "You found that funny, didn't you? The thing about mothers showing up without warning. That is universal, apparently. I do not understand this form of communication," Zalthor admitted. "He speaks about serious matters but makes them seem trivial. He mocks himself and his own people along with mocking us. Why do humans do this? Because life is hard, Jake said simply. We deal with scary things and sad things and frustrating things every single day. If we did not laugh, we would just be miserable all the time. Comedy helps us cope. It helps us see things from different angles, and it reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. Lisa added her own thoughts. Laughter is also a way of building connections between people. When we laugh together, we are sharing an experience. It creates bonds. Danny up there is making jokes about the situation we are all dealing with right now. The fact that aliens showed up and life changed dramatically. By making it funny, he makes it less scary. People leave here feeling better than when they came in. Zalthor watched the rest of the performance in thoughtful silence. He observed how the humans responded to Danny Kim's words. They laughed and clapped and sometimes groaned at particularly bad puns, but they were all engaged and enjoying themselves. Even when the jokes were about uncomfortable topics, the atmosphere remained positive. This was a completely foreign concept to Valorian culture, where serious matters were treated with appropriate gravity and dignity. But watching these humans, he could see the value in their approach. They were not ignoring the serious nature of the Empire's arrival. They were simply choosing to face it with humor rather than fear. After the show ended, Danny Kim came down from the stage, and Jake introduced him to the Valorian delegation. Danny shook hands with each of them, or tried to, since Valorian hands were not really designed for handshaking. "Thanks for being good sports," Danny said to Zalthor. "I hope I did not offend you with the jokes." "It is all in good fun. You did not offend," Zalthor said slowly. "You provided perspective. That is valuable even when delivered through mockery." Danny laughed. "That might be the nicest review I have ever gotten. Mockery with value. I am putting that on my business cards." On the third day of what was supposed to be a simple conquest operation, General Paul Henderson invited the Valorian delegation to observe a session of the United Nations. Zalthor agreed because he wanted to see how Earth's governments functioned, or failed to function as the case might be. The UN building was impressive from the outside, with its distinctive architecture and flags from nearly 200 nations flying in front of it. Inside the main assembly hall, Zalthor and his team sat in a special observation area, while below them representatives from every nation on Earth gathered to discuss the Valorian situation. The session began with a representative from Brazil, speaking in Portuguese, which was translated into multiple languages simultaneously. He argued that Earth should negotiate for technology transfers before agreeing to any imperial terms. Then a representative from Russia stood and argued in Russian that military protection should be the primary concern, and that Earth needed guarantees about defensive support. A representative from France then stood and suggested in French that cultural preservation should be the main priority, and that any agreement must protect Earth's diverse cultures from being absorbed into a homogeneous imperial system. Zalthor watched this back and forth for nearly an hour. Representatives kept standing and speaking and disagreeing with each other. Some wanted to accept the Empire's terms immediately. Others wanted to reject them entirely. Many wanted to negotiate, but they could not agree on what to negotiate for. The Chinese representative wanted economic considerations. The Indian representative wanted assurances about population autonomy. The American representative wanted guarantees about individual freedoms. The Egyptian representative wanted protections for historical sites. It seemed like every single nation had different priorities and different concerns. "This is your unified government," Zalthor finally asked Paul Henderson, who sat beside him in the observation area. "This is how you make decisions as a species." Paul chuckled and shook his head. "No, this is not our unified government. We do not have one of those. This is the UN, which is more like a forum where nations come together to talk. Sometimes they agree on things and sometimes they do not. It is complicated. Then who has the authority to accept or reject imperial terms on behalf of your species?" Zalthor asked, and his patterns were flickering rapidly with confusion and growing frustration. "Honestly," Paul said with a shrug, "nobody really. Each nation is sovereign, which means they make their own decisions. Even if every government in the UN agreed to join the Empire, which would be a miracle in itself, you would still have problems, because individual people might not agree with their governments. And humans are really bad at doing things they do not want to do even when their leaders tell them to. But this is impossible," Zalthor said, and his voice was louder than he intended. Several UN representatives looked up at the observation area. "How do you function as a civilization if you cannot agree on anything?" How do you accomplish anything at all? We manage, Paul said calmly. It is messy and slow and frustrating, but we figure things out eventually. Usually. Sometimes it takes a while. He gestured at the assembly hall below. Look, I know this seems chaotic to you, but this is actually progress. 100 years ago, half these nations did not exist. 200 years ago, most humans never traveled more than a few miles from where they were born. We are learning how to work together on a global scale. It just takes time. The Valorian Empire does not have time for this chaos, Zalthor said flatly. We have a schedule. Other worlds waiting for integration. We cannot spend years waiting for you to reach consensus. Then you have a problem, Paul said, because that is reality. You can try to force the issue, but I guarantee it will not go the way you expect. Humans are stubborn. Tell us we have to do something, and half of us will refuse just on principle. It is not logical, but it is who we are. That afternoon, Zalthor demanded a private meeting with just Jake Morrison and Lisa Campbell and Paul Henderson. They met in a quiet conference room with windows overlooking the East River. Zalthor stood by the window and looked out at the city. Millions of humans living and working in close proximity. So much activity and noise and chaos. He turned to face the three humans who sat calmly at the conference table. I do not understand your species, Zalthor said, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, his voice carried genuine uncertainty, rather than commanding authority. You face the might of the Valorian Empire, which has conquered 73 worlds without significant resistance. Yet you do not surrender and you do not attack. You serve us food and show us museums and comedy shows. You ask endless questions and debate among yourselves and seem completely unconcerned about the fact that we could destroy your cities from orbit if we chose to. What are you? Jake leaned back in his chair and considered the question carefully. Honest answer. We are survivors. We are not the strongest species on our own planet. We are not the fastest or the toughest. We do not have claws or armor or venom, but we survived anyway. We survived ice ages and predators and diseases and famines. We survived by being adaptable and by working together when we had to. And yeah, also by being incredibly stubborn and refusing to give up even when giving up would be the logical choice. Lisa added her perspective. We also learned something important over thousands of years of human history. Empires that rule through force alone eventually fall. The Roman Empire fell. The Mongol Empire fell. The British Empire fell. Every empire that tried to control people without understanding them eventually collapsed. But partnerships based on mutual respect and benefit can last for generations. That is what we are hoping for here. You propose an equal partnership, Zalthor said. The Valorian Empire does not do equal partnerships. We have the superior technology and military strength. We dictate terms, and that is exactly why you are having trouble with us, Paul said. Look, I have studied military history my entire career. I know how conquest works. You show up with overwhelming force and people surrender because fighting seems hopeless. But here is the thing about humans. We do not think like that. Tell us a fight is hopeless and some of us will fight anyway just to prove you wrong. We have stories about last stands and impossible victories that we tell our children. We celebrate the people who refuse to give up even when they should have. We are not trying to be difficult. Jake said, we genuinely want to find a solution that works for everyone. But it has to be a real solution, not just us signing papers and hoping for the best. You want Earth to be part of your empire. Fine, but what does that actually mean for the 8 billion people living here? How does it affect their daily lives, their jobs, their families, their cultures? These are real questions that need real answers. Zalthor moved away from the window and sat down at the table. His large frame made the human furniture seem small, but he managed to arrange himself in something resembling a sitting position. I will be honest with you because I see no point in deception anymore. In 3,000 years of imperial expansion, no species has ever responded to us the way you have. Every other world either surrendered immediately or made threats they could not back up. You have done neither. You have treated us like guests, like potential friends rather than conquerors. It is deeply unsettling. Why is friendship unsettling? Lisa asked gently. Because the empire is built on hierarchy and dominance, Zalthor explained. There are rulers and there are subjects. Clear lines of authority and power. Friendship implies equality, and equality undermines the entire structure. If Earth becomes our equal, then why should other worlds accept being subjects? The whole system could unravel. Maybe it should, Jake said quietly. I mean, no offense, but a system built entirely on dominance does not sound sustainable. What happens when you meet a species stronger than you? What happens when your military advantage disappears? If the only thing holding your empire together is fear, then you do not really have unity. You just have compliance. Paul nodded in agreement. Real strength comes from willing cooperation. People working together because they choose to, not because they have to. That kind of bond is much harder to break. The Empire might have 73 worlds under its control, but how many of those worlds would actually help you if you faced a real crisis? How many would defend the Empire if they had the choice to walk away? Zalthor's patterns dimmed as he processed this. He had never considered these questions before. The Empire simply was. It had existed for 3,000 years, and it would continue to exist. That was the assumption. But these humans were questioning the very foundation of that assumption. They were suggesting that the Empire was weaker than it appeared, precisely because it relied on force rather than genuine loyalty. What would you propose instead? Zalthor asked. If not imperial integration, then what trade agreements? Lisa said immediately. Cultural exchange programs, scientific cooperation, mutual defense pacts, all the things that nations on Earth do with each other. We remain independent, but we work together on projects that benefit everyone. You get access to Earth's resources and creativity. We get access to your technology and protection. Nobody surrenders. Nobody loses autonomy. We build something new together. The High Council would never approve such an arrangement, Zalthor said, but even as he spoke, he found himself wondering if that was actually true. The Council was conservative and traditional, but they were not stupid. If they could be convinced that partnership was more valuable than conquest, they might listen. Then help us convince them. Jake said, You have been here for 3 days. You have seen how humans live and think. You understand us better than any other Valorian probably ever has. Write your report honestly. Tell them what you found here. Let them make an informed decision rather than just following the same old pattern. 2 weeks after, returning to his ship, Zalthor stood in the communication chamber and prepared to give his report to the Valorian High Council. The holographic projectors activated, and suddenly he was surrounded by the images of the 12 council members who ruled the Empire. Each one appeared as a full-size figure arranged in a circle around him. Their patterns glowed with various colors that indicated their different moods and temperaments. The Supreme Chancellor's patterns were a stern red that demanded immediate answers. Commander Zalthor. The Supreme Chancellor began, and his voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of imperial authority. You were sent to Earth to secure their submission. Your report indicates that you have failed this objective. Explain yourself. Zalthor had spent the past 2 weeks preparing for this moment. He had reviewed all his recordings and notes. He had consulted with his advisors, especially Krelmuk, who had developed an unexpected fondness for human culture. He had thought carefully about what he would say and how he would say it. Now the moment had arrived and he needed to choose his words with precision. Supreme Chancellor and honored council members, Zalthor said, and he kept his patterns neutral and calm. I have not failed in my mission. I have instead discovered something far more valuable than another conquered world. I have found a species that could change the Empire for the better if we approach them or rectly. The humans of Earth refuse to surrender in the traditional manner. However, they do not refuse contact. They propose what they call diplomatic relations based on mutual respect and cooperation. The council members' patterns flickered with various reactions. Confusion from some, anger from others. One council member, whose name was Velthar, spoke up with patterns that showed skepticism. This is unacceptable. The Empire does not negotiate with primitive species. We dictate terms. This is how we have operated successfully for millennia. Why should we change our methods now? Because the humans are not like other species we have encountered, Zalthor replied. With respect, council member, I spent 3 days observing them closely. They have something we have not seen before. They possess what I can only describe as cultural weapons. They disarm through hospitality. They confuse through humor. They resist through cooperative stubbornness disguised as friendly discussion. Traditional conquest methods do not work on them. Another council member named Thirzan asked a practical question. What of military force? Did you assess their defensive capabilities? Could we not simply compel their submission through demonstration of superior power? We could destroy their cities, Zalthor admitted. We have the capability, but I do not believe it would achieve the desired result. The humans have a concept they call martyrdom. They celebrate those who die for causes they believe in, Military action would likely unite them against us and create generations of resistance fighters. Furthermore, they possess nuclear weapons and have already demonstrated they are willing to use extreme measures when they feel threatened. A military campaign on Earth would be costly in ways the Empire has not experienced in thousands of years. The Supreme Chancellor's patterns shifted to orange, which indicated deep thought. You mentioned that they propose diplomatic relations. Explain precisely what this means. They want to establish formal relations between Earth and the Empire as equals or near equals, Zalthor said, and he could feel the tension in the room even through the holographic projection. They propose trade agreements where both sides benefit, cultural exchange programs where we learn from each other, scientific cooperation on projects of mutual interest, mutual defense pacts where we help protect each other from external threats. They would share their resources and innovations with us, and in return they want access to our technology and protection. Equals, Velthar said, and his patterns flashed angry red. A primitive world that has barely achieved spaceflight wants to be treated as our equal? This is absurd. What do they have that the Empire could possibly need or want? Zalthor had prepared for this question. He activated his own holographic display and showed images he had captured during his time on Earth. More than you might think. Their technology is less advanced but highly creative. Their computer systems use different logic patterns than ours, and might offer solutions to problems we have struggled with. Their medical research is primitive but innovative, particularly in areas we have overlooked. More importantly, they have something we have lost over 3,000 years of imperial dominance. They have cultural vitality, art and music and literature that is constantly evolving, stories that inspire and challenge. They have passion and curiosity and a hunger to explore and learn. These are valuable resources. The council members discussed among themselves for several minutes. Zalthor waited patiently while his superiors debated his report. Finally, the Supreme Chancellor raised one hand and the discussion ceased. He looked directly at Zalthor with all four of his eyes. You have presented an unusual situation. Before we make any decision, we must ask you directly. What is your recommendation, Commander? Should we continue with traditional integration, or should we pursue this diplomatic approach the humans propose? Zalthor took a breath and committed himself fully to his answer. I recommend we accept their proposal for diplomatic relations. I believe we have more to gain from Earth as a willing partner than as a reluctant subject. Furthermore, I believe this could set a new precedent for the Empire. Not every world needs to be conquered. Some might be better served as allies. The humans have a saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. It means kindness achieves better results than force. I have seen this principle in action, and I believe it has merit. There was a long silence. Then Therzan spoke with patterns that showed cautious curiosity. If we accept this recommendation and it fails, we will appear weak. Other member worlds might question their own status. This could destabilize the entire imperial structure, or it could strengthen the Empire. Zalthor countered. Consider this. We have 73 worlds under our control, but how many of them truly support the Empire? How many would help us if we faced a real crisis? How many are simply waiting for an opportunity to rebel? If we can demonstrate that cooperation brings greater benefits than subjugation, we might transform reluctant subjects into genuine allies. Earth could be the test case for a new model of imperial relations. The Supreme Chancellor's patterns shifted through several colors as he processed this idea. Very well. After much consideration, we will accept your recommendation. You will return to Earth and negotiate formal diplomatic relations. However, there will be conditions. They must agree to open trade. They must agree to share their scientific research. They must agree to military cooperation against external threats. And they must agree to accept an imperial embassy on their world with full diplomatic privileges. If they accept these terms, we will establish them as the first allied world of the Valorian Empire. If they refuse, you will return and we will reconsider our options. Do you understand? I understand, Supreme Chancellor, Zalthor said, and his patterns brightened with relief and excitement. I will return to Earth immediately. 3 months later, a larger Valorian vessel approached Earth. This time there were no weapons displays or intimidating messages. Instead, there was a simple communication. Ambassador Zalthor requests permission to land and begin formal diplomatic negotiations. The response from Earth was immediate and enthusiastic. Permission granted. Welcome back. Zalthor descended to the same landing pad in New York where he had first met the humans. When the boarding ramp extended, he saw Jake Morrison and Lisa Campbell and Paul Henderson waiting for him just as before. But this time there was also a crowd of human reporters and cameras and officials from various nations. A large banner had been hung near the landing area. It read, "Welcome back, friends," in multiple languages including Valorian script. Jake approached with his hand extended, and this time Zalthor took it. The human gesture of greeting felt less strange now. "Welcome back, Ambassador," Jake said with genuine warmth. "We heard you got promoted. Congratulations." "Thank you, Captain Morrison," Zalthor replied. "I have been authorized by the High Council to negotiate formal diplomatic relations. We have prepared several proposals for your consideration." "Excellent," Lisa said with a bright smile. "We have also prepared proposals. I think you will find we have some exciting ideas for cooperation. But first things first, we have lunch ready. We got pizza from 3 different places so you can try them all and decide which one is your favorite." Paul grinned and added, "We also got tickets to a baseball game for tomorrow. The Yankees are playing the Red Sox. It is one of the biggest rivalries in the sport. You are going to love it or hate it. Hard to predict." Zalthor's pattern shifted to a warm golden color that indicated contentment and happiness. "I look forward to both the negotiations and the baseball game, though I still do not fully understand the appeal of competitive sports." "You will," Jake said confidently. "Trust me, you will." As they walked toward the waiting vehicles, Krelmak, who had been assigned as Zalthor's permanent attaché, approached his commander privately. "Sir, I have been studying human culture extensively. I believe I understand why our traditional methods failed here." "Why is that?" Zalthor asked. "Because humans do not see the universe in terms of conquerors and conquered," Krelmak explained. "They see potential friends they have not met yet. Every stranger is a possible ally. Every conflict is a chance for cooperation. It is an unusual perspective, but I think it might be more effective than our approach." Zalthor watched as a group of human children pressed against a security barrier nearby. They waved at the Valorian delegation with excitement and curiosity. Several of his staff members waved back tentatively. One human child held a sign that read, "Aliens are awesome," with a drawing of what was presumably meant to be a Valorian. The proportions were wrong, but the sentiment was clear. "I believe you are correct," Zalthor said to his attaché. "Perhaps we have spent too long seeing the galaxy as something to be controlled. Maybe it is time we started seeing it as something to be shared." He looked at the enthusiastic humans and felt something he had never experienced during a conquest operation. Hope. Not just hope for success, but hope for genuine connection and friendship. These strange, stubborn, creative humans had taught the Empire something valuable. Sometimes the greatest strength was not in forcing others to submit, but in inspiring them to cooperate, willingly. That evening at the first official state dinner between Earth and the Valorian Empire, Zalthor found himself actually enjoying the strange human food and the even stranger human conversations.